Ours is a fine little house, Jack.
Are you allowed to speak along the way? I was thinking there might be rules.
Let me put it this way. Very few make it all the way without uttering a word. But do carry on merrily. Just don't believe you're going to tell me something I haven't heard before.
Oops, that was maybe a mistake.
What was maybe a mistake?
Me getting in this car with you. You might as well be a serial killer. Sorry, but you do kind of look like one.
Screaming. I definitely think that you should. Nobody wants to help!
Hey, make some man, take things over. Hey, let him loose, hard to swallow.
Mind if I take a look in the van, please, sir?
I'd be a bad guy if I said no. Some people claim that the atrocities we commit in our fiction are those inner desires which we cannot commit in our controlled civilization. So they are expressed instead through our art. I don't agree. I believe heaven and hell are one and the same. The soul belongs to heaven and the body to hell. When I think about all the things I've done in my life without in any way resulting in punishment.
Hello, welcome to Movie Umpers. My name is Bob Sham.
My name is Angela.
And this is it. This is it. No more Lars von Trier. The only thing we haven't discussed of Lars von Trier is his stuff he's made for TV in Denmark, stuff like that.
We've done all the movies.
A couple of documentaries, which one looks pretty good. Maybe we'll catch it down the road.
Sure.
But all the major feature films that have international releases, we have watched them all. So we say goodbye to Lars von Trier forever. Will he make that third America Land of Opportunity film? I don't know. Who knows how good it'll be. And at the end of the episode, we will reflect on some scores we gave to Lars's movies over the year and some changes we made to those scores along the way.
Uh-huh.
And they might be controversial, but I have things to... I didn't touch Dancer in the Dark. That's the only one I didn't touch because I knew you'd...
I was ready. I was going to say.
You'd fucking bleed out of your eyes or some shit if I changed that score. Today, yes, we say goodbye to a dreary year of Lars von Trier. It has been a dreary year. We did predict that splendidly.
Mm-hmm.
The whole political climate of the year. I've never been more right in my predictions as to what happened. I mean, I'm not always correct in politics, you know.
Sure, yeah.
I will make predictions and I'm often wrong. This year, it pretty much happened exactly as I thought it would.
Yeah.
The only difference is that maybe Trump won even a little bit harder than I expected him to.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I didn't expect, but wow, what a year. What a year. For our last Lars von Trier selection, we're discussing his last feature film, The House That Jack Built from 2018, directed by him, written by him and Jenny Halund, based on a story that her and Lars did together, starring Matt Dillon. This is our first, I believe, Matt Dillon film.
It was nice to see him. He was one of those guys that I loved when I was
an essential actor in the
teenager.
90s. He still looks great for his age.
He looks
too.
really great.
Bruno Ganz, Uma Thurman, Riley Keough, Jeremy Davies, amongst many others. Cinematography by Manuel Alberto Claro. And this is another Lars von Trier movie that is filmed in Europe. I believe they filmed it in, can't remember, Switzerland or Sweden. One of those countries. it's another one that takes place in the Pacific Northwest. He seemed there must be the way certain areas of Europe look, and I'm tricked into believing it, right? But when he sets a movie in America, it's always in the Pacific Northwest, in the Northwest of America, except for the Dogville and Manderley.
Yeah.
And this one is like Canada, and in that area, up into Canada, is pretty notorious for serial killers and shit like that,
and a lot of. Like an extreme number of unsolved murders.
Yes, they got in Canada they have that Highway of Tears in which tons of indigenous people have been murdered, crimes have gone unsolved, and that's on top of other types of people being murdered. And then you got in the Pacific Northwest, more infamous characters like Ted Bundy. And Lars studied a lot about serial killers, more than he did about how police procedure works and what they would do in certain situations. But you can tell that it is very studied here in psychopathy, and I think that comes through in the movie. And I really like he does capture the bizarre sociopathic confidence that a psychopathic murderer would portray.
That is what I liked about this movie, was the character study of this man, Jack. There were little moments where you could tell he was pulling things from different serial killers that we know of. At one point, it's not a thing he does often, but at one point he cuts off the breasts of this woman who he says is the only woman he actually really ever cared about, and he keeps one of them and makes it into a wallet. He's not making a bunch of skins into a wallet, but that's a very Ed Gein thing to have done.
Can touch on base on certain things.
Yeah. As far as a serial killer goes, he was so all over the place. That's what's interesting to me, is that he didn't really try to pin down one guy with one tell. Usually serial killers have a method. This guy, every murder he tells about is completely different.
I think there was this idea that he studied a bunch of killers and psychopathy, and Matt Dillon was maybe focused on Ted Bundy, but as the movie went forward, the character itself kind of became its own version of things, maybe a bit here, a bit there, but became more of a unique character in that sense. And it's dark to say that I kind of like the character. I don't mean that I like the character, but I actually think the execution of the persona is actually quite good here, and I don't mind it at all. And I think when we're to talk about this movie, it's another one where it's split into chapters.
We're used to that. That's to be expected. The chapters are to be expected.
And there's a similarity to Nymphomaniac here, in the sense that the character has these, or the character fancies himself very smart, and he's got a lot of information and things to say about things, and that connect, and kind of like a Stellan Skarsgård character in Nymphomaniac, though he was very much turned up in there, but it turned out that character was a creep, right?
Right. Kind of that same thing, like you were saying, like Nymphomaniac, he's telling his story to someone, like she's telling her story to Stellan Skarsgård. He's telling his story to Virgil.
But he's like a learned man. Like he was
he wanted to be an architect, or he was a failed architect.
We kind of see these types of characters show up too, like in the Paul Bettany character in Dogville. He's a guy who's very smart, but like he's always wanting to complete something. It almost seems like Lars is making a skewering a certain type.
Yeah.
Like a general intellectual that doesn't really have much to show for it.
Just can't get it off the ground.
I gotta be honest, I might include myself in something like that.
Sure.
Because I'm trying to get my shit together and figuring out what I'm going to execute. I can relate to it. And it is a weird, bad habit, but it just seems like, yeah, there are a lot of smart people that don't have that proper focus, right? But his focus is in murder, and he also has that superiority complex.
Well, and he does talk at the very beginning, and it completely changes, and Virgil calls him out on it. He talks at the beginning about how he became an engineer because he couldn't be an architect. I think that's the way it went. But he wanted to build this house. He bought this huge plot of land, and he wanted to build this house. But he tore it down multiple times. He would start and then say, oh, this isn't what I want exactly. I need to start again. And eventually in the story, he's not mentioning the house at all. And Virgil finally was like, I thought you were building a house.
Now, when you say Virgil, he's literally talking to the ancient Roman poet, Virgil.
Yeah.
And Virgil, if you recall, if you go back to your senior year lit class, Virgil guides Dante through hell in that epic poem where Dante Alighieri goes into hell. Blah,
Dante's
blah, blah.
Inferno.
And so Virgil is kind of guiding. I think it exists like he's talking to him inside his head, like he's like a voice in his head. And you don't know at first, but it unravels. But when we saw the flashback scene of him clipping the duckling's leg, and I was like, please let that not be real. And I looked it up. That's when it was revealed to me accidentally at that point that he was talking to the poet Virgil.
Okay. He does eventually start calling him Virgil. And
it becomes more clear as it goes on, and I think we would have gotten it, but I kind of spoiled it for myself who he was talking to. I wouldn't really call it a spoiler. It's kind of just this through line into this guy's journey of psychopathy or whatever.
So it's set up that he's killed, I think he says upwards of 60 people at one point, but he's picked out 5 examples to tell Virgil. And you have to think these are the ones that meant the most to him or he thought were the most interesting to tell. Seems to be the first one where there's family. We can kind of go through some of them because some of them I think are important to talk about. But when they get to the end, they say that they've been on a journey together. So is he dead from the start? Is he a dead man walking through the layers of hell with Virgil while telling this story? Or do you think that's part of his
I do think that
psychosis?
I do think that when he goes into hell and we see him go through a hole in the floor when he finally builds his house, that he is dead at that point. I do think that.
I do think that as well, but I just didn't know if...
But is the narration, like as they're walking, are they telling his story?
Right.
Yeah, I think I can see why you would come to that conclusion.
Either way,
sure.
I think. This is one of those things where I appreciate a lot of what Lars von Trier does, but he, again, is doing too much. He's doing too much. This could have been just as well if he was on death row talking to a reporter. I get why it's Virgil, but there's this thing about Lars von Trier where he's also that man who's too smart for everyone in the room. He thinks he's so smart that he layers all these things, and it's like, so there's that, but then also at the end of every chapter, he's got Matt Dillon standing by a truck doing these like cards.
We kind of criticized Lars for that in the movie Epidemic. You remember?
Yeah.
Where it was kind of a bit of a comedy story inside of a story, but they came off a little too clever.
But that was really early, so it was a little forgivable. He didn't know. He was a young guy being like, I'm so smart.
Maybe what you're trying to say is, and we've come across this again with the comparison with Nymphomaniac, where there are moments where we wish Lars went a little past his own tropes.
Yes.
Comparing him really to himself and how it feels a little exhausted and what is executed well, the difference between that. And yeah, I guess what you're saying is that the tropes here just felt a little bit more of a drag when maybe it can pull back into an interesting character study. And I do think it's an interesting character study.
I do too.
But yeah, the padding of it, I guess, is where you're a little split on it.
It's too much for me. I feel like he's just trying to beat us over the head with it in 3 different ways.
He's not a subtle man.
No.
Even when he's talking about something that's very educated, very intelligent, yeah, there's really no subtlety.
His better movies are the ones where he doesn't try to have all of these extra layers, like Breaking the Waves, like a Melancholia. You know, there are chapters or parts that are broken out. Like he does that. I'm used to that. I like that, actually. It's unique. There's just too many things.
I mean, I wouldn't say chapters are unique, but they work. They're just a functioning of storytelling.
Well, I don't know that many directors who do that very often. It comes up occasionally, but it's like his thing.
It's like a lot of art films will work like that. We see his first kill, and it is Uma Thurman who plays Uma Thurman characters in Lars movies. We saw her again in Nymphomaniac. She's very funny in that movie, and her character is very assertive and funny. And I feel like Uma could be a great comedic lead if Lars made like a comedy in one of his movies. Like her presence is is kind of funny and overwhelming here.
You might as well be a serial killer. I'm sorry, but you do kind of look like one.
Like me to drive you back to your car?
No. I'll take care of myself. I'm sorry. Were you offended that I called you a serial killer?
No. It's of absolutely no importance to me.
She needs a ride. Her car's broken down, and it seems like she's such a target, an obvious target, and she points that out and starts to point out the flaws of why he would make a good serial killer and why he wouldn't, why he looks like one, why he doesn't. And so he ends up taking her back and forth to this shop to get her jack repaired, and it breaks, and she has to beg him. And at some point, she talks him into another ride for like the third time, and she goes,
You know, I take it all back. What I said earlier about you looking like a serial killer? No. You don't have the disposition for that sort of thing. You're way too much of a wimp to murder anyone.
and then that's when he takes the broken jack and smashes her face. And that's the first kill we see.
I love this one in particular because he's telling this story to Virgil. At this point, we don't know it's Virgil. So you don't know if he's sort of doing a defending your life kind of thing or if he's talking to an interviewer or what. But he's telling this story. So it's from his perspective. So you don't really know if she's really that much of a cunt or if this is his perspective on how it went down.
Virgil points out that he makes all his women seem completely stupid and very like gullible because he kills Siobhan Fallon Hogan's character. We've seen her in a few Lars movies by talking her into like he's faking being a police, and then he gets inside and pretends to be an insurance guy, and then he strangles her. But it's a more realistic strangulation scene because like at one point her throat's crushed and she's gasping. But like the reality is when you strangle someone, it's going to take a very long time for them to die. And that's kind of what I liked about this scene was how long it took. But he also, this character has, and I actually had an issue with this character has OCD at the start, and then he gets over it, I guess, through the murders.
He says that he spiraled and it went away.
I kind of wish he would have maintained that, because that seems like an interesting counterpoint to making this challenging for him.
But how unfortunate for you, Jack. And to top it off with cleaning compulsions.
So after he kills her, he's going back and forth in the house because he's imagining like bloodstains under something that the body wasn't even close to. So, and I actually thought that was really good.
I did too.
And then and then he drags the body right outside of the house as a cop car is creeping down the street. And then the cop car comes up. Of course, it's a small town, so the cop knows. So he's like giving like too much information about how he came to see her about something, but she's not there. And he's just overly talkative because he's got that psychopathic confidence. And while he goes in with the cop, and the cop's just annoyed by him, and he's touching everything, so that gives cover for why his fingerprints would be in the place. But when the cop is in, he ties the body to his van, and then he drives, and he drags the corpse. And it's got this bloody smear all the way back to this cooler warehouse where he keeps bodies. And almost like he's being protected by some god or something, rain comes and washes the bloody trail that he drags. And
he, after that, seems to no longer do anything to try to not get caught. Also, just so you know, her name is Siobhan.
Siobhan.
That's one of those weird that's the weirdest spelling.
It's an Irish spelling.
It's Siobhan. Just to say, she's brilliant. I love her. Every time we see her, I get excited. She's always great.
Oh, really?
She's always great at whatever
you get excited
part she does.
Siobhan.
You excite me. So
sorry, I mispronounced your name. And so we get flashbacks of him as well. And when he cuts the duck, there's something. This movie's kind of infamous for that duckling scene, and it is fake. So I checked that out, and it's kind of fucked up that I got to check and make sure after hearing what happened to the donkey in Mandalay.
Well, I immediately said, was that real? That looked too real.
It is fake.
It was done very well.
The effects that Lars utilizes in his movies it actually is really smart how he makes those effects work, and they don't overwhelm the movie, but there's something about them that makes you like question like the reality of it, I mean, that's a sign that the effects are actually quite good.
Absolutely. That was horrifying. That really, really got to me.
So he, there's another kill in which he dates a woman with 2 kids and takes them out to teach them about hunting and using guns. And we don't really get the transition as to him setting them up, but it cuts to him shooting, like hunting them. And they're taking cover. And you see it coming from a mile away, but he's talking about like, this is that Stellan Skarsgård point in Nymphomaniac where he has to explain the ethics of hunting. Like if you kill the best thing to do if you got a mother and 2 young deer is you kill one of the young deer in the back, because the second deer and the mother will survive and move on. If you kill the mother, the biggest one first, then the 2 young will die. So talking about hunter ethics, but he's applying it to hunting human beings. And so, yeah, he shoots this lady's kids and ends up finding this lady like just scared, huddled in like some hole in the ground, and he just shoots her in the back.
But before that, he makes her sit out the picnic to eat with her 2 dead children and him.
Why don't you do as I say and give the youngster a little piece of pie? This was supposed to be an enjoyable picnic. This has been a good day.
I like it as like a vignette, like the scene, but it doesn't make sense with who he is in every other scene. I'm all of a sudden this guy with this like half beard and I'm a hunter and he's obviously dated this woman long enough for her to be comfortable with him taking her children out into the woods to teach them to shoot.
Well, there is that aspect of psychopathic types. They have this dumb confidence in a sense, but they also learn to adapt how they act to make other people feel comfortable, knowing what they want out of companionship or something.
The other thing is, at first he takes pictures of the corpses, but then by some weird coincidence, at some point he bought a freezer from a guy with all these pizzas in it, and he starts storing dead bodies in this freezer. Not every one of them, because in that family, I think he only brings in the smallest boy because he actually manipulates this fake corpse grotesquely
genuinely
to be
creepy.
smiling.
I mean,
it is so fucked up.
This is the aspect. I mean, this is a horror movie essentially. I mean, this is Lars making a horror film.
Yeah.
And yeah, that because he calls the kid grumpy because he was always like kind of this little dismissive shit.
Then I could manipulate their expressions in positions with steel wire, pins, tape, and things like that. And then when they were frozen, remove it all and have a nearly credible human being. Grumpy was grumpy no more.
Does some taxidermy on this kid and makes this child's corpse smile. It is completely fucked up.
That room is very interesting to me because like that kid he's very specific with, but other bodies it'll be a woman in a bra and panties and her legs just hanging off the shelf. That room and the bodies is the only consistency between once he starts doing it between all of these things.
And this cooler by the end of the movie is just piled with like
dead body.
Yeah, and so there's another one where he does a scene with Riley Keough, who is like a domestic violence pretty much scene, and he manipulates the shit out of her. And first she like calls the police, and then he talks them out of it, and then he talks her back in, and he's like drawing on her breast like he's gonna cut her breasts off. But she just thinks he's weird.
Yeah, she's like, you're a fucking weirdo.
But after the police get involved and she's scared and she's calmed down, then he just fucking kills her and
he
then
cuts her boobs off. That's the one.
Yeah.
He does say before he tells that story that she is the only one he cared about. He doesn't say he loves her, but he says something like, I cared about her more than a psychopath should be able to care about people.
His fifth kill leads to him being caught. He's abducted these men and they're all in his storage, and he wants to do this thing that he read that Nazis did, that where he wants to kill as many in a headshot and line them up, tie them up, and kill as many with one bullet, but he needs a full metal jacket. So he goes to this guy that lives in a trailer that is implied that he's known him for a long time, but he's just a character that just pops up here. And the guy, I think, didn't he call the police on him? Didn't he find out he called the police on him?
Yes. So the man pulled a gun because the police had been looking for him and had come there to ask questions. So he pulled the gun on him and called the cops, and the cops were on the way, and Jack turns the tables on the dude, kills him, and
Stabs
puts the
him in
guy's
throat.
robe on. So then he has on this red robe with this hood that he keeps on for the rest of the movie.
And then that fools a cop as he comes in and he shoots the police, but he steals the cop car, leaves the siren, goes all the way back with the full metal jacket bullet. He just needed one. And he pulls up to his warehouse freezer with the siren just blaring outside.
Leaves the door open.
And he goes in right when he starts to shoot. He hears Virgil in the voice of an Italian, old man in an Italian accent. But then he hears a voice, and it's Bruno Ganz who's playing Virgil. And then he meets him in his facility.
There's this room in the back with a door that he's never been able to open, and he hears a voice from that door. Originally, that's where he wanted to put the bodies because it's one room further, but he gets it open, and then Virgil's just sitting in the corner waiting for him.
And Bruno's asking him what about your house that you always wanted to build? You wanted to be an architect. You built these structures and you keep tearing them down over and over again. And then, but police are actually coming, but somehow in this span of time, Jack is able to finally make his house out of the corpses of all the people that he has killed. So we have a corpse house, and he goes into the corpse house, and the police have to, I guess, they cut their way through with a blowtorch into the freezer. And then you just see a cop's hand just start shooting, just going in there. He can't see shit and just starts shooting. It seemed very clumsy.
It was dumb.
But I think it implies that maybe Jack did get killed somehow in that moment. But we see him go into a hole in the ground with Virgil, and he is in hell. So they're just wandering through hell, and I think he is dead at this point. And then there's this point where it's really hard to get to this other point.
Well, they go, and it's like the end. And he says, "This is the end. And this is not where you're meant to be. I need to take you back. I just wanted you to see the worst part. But now I'm going to take you where you're going to spend eternity." And he says, "Well, what's at that door over there?" And Virgil says, "Well, that door leads back out. But there's, the bridge is broken." And he says, "Well, I'm going to try to get over there." And he's like, "Listen, a lot of people try to get over there, but they always fall. No one's ever made it across because they try to climb around this very precarious wall.
And
it's like a circle room."
We've seen throughout this whole movie just this blatant overconfidence he has in killing people. Even coming in and talking to police while there's corpses out in the grass. He's just well overconfident. So of course his character's like, "Nah, man, I can do this." So he starts to climb the wall, and sure enough, he falls like everyone else does and falls into the abyss of hell. And he's gone where he belongs, truly forever.
And I think that there was nowhere else for Virgil to take him. I think Virgil knew that he was so overconfident that he would try to do that. He was supposed to fall into that pit.
Yeah.
Virgil says goodbye to him before he starts doing it. He knows he's not going to make it.
And that is the house that Jack built. I kind of didn't mind the ending very much. I kind of like that. I felt like it felt more like, I know he's a big Tarkovsky guy. That's kind of when it felt a little Tarkovsky when it got into all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I didn't mind the ending so much. We're going to give it 1 through 5 each, combined for best out of 10. And then we'll go through all the other movies we discussed of Lars and see where we fall on them at the end of the year. But what do you give The House That Jack Built?
I'm going to give it a 3.25.
I think the character study of it is really good. I kind of agree with you on the tropes, but to be expected in some sensibility. Mm-hmm. And I like some chapters better than others.
Yes.
I feel like the when he was hunting the woman and her children, that was
it didn't fit.
Well, I think, it's not that it didn't fit. I just don't think it executed. When he kills the Shaban, how do you pronounce it?
Shaban.
That's probably the best scene in the movie in terms of how that worked out and representing his hubris and his OCD. That was very fascinating. And yeah, it was kind of a bummer when he dropped it. But I think just as far as a movie where I want to watch a movie that seems to be a very particular view of a serial killer, like a crime movie, I think this is pretty worthy contender. I'm just going to go about a 0.25 higher than you. I'm at a 3.5. So check it out at a 6.75. The House That Jack Built is between a couple of other movies, namely The Disorderly Orderly, my favorite Jerry Lewis movie so far, and Joe Dante's The Howling from 1981. It's about on the lines of those movies, as good as those, if not better. Now, let me take a look at the list. I'll throw it up on the screen here. But I got a list of the Von Trier film scores just to get reacquainted in the order in which we discussed them. The Element of Crime, it got a 6.25. A very his debut feature film, full-length feature film. I thought it was pretty crafty. If you like old noir and stuff, it's definitely doing a genre film in that sense. And he kind of maintains it. Epidemic is kind of a movie within a movie, a bit more of a comedy, but we kind of criticize the winking knowingness of it, like a little bit too smart for your own good, but pretty normal at that age, right? When you are a talented filmmaker. Europa got an 8.5. I think that movie is actually still really good to this day. I really enjoy that one. And kind of, he's taking the genre movie and kind of made it as good as any is out there. A great neo-noir there, Europa.
Amazing performances. Breaking
the Waves, S tier.
The best one.
I think that is the one that shows the best balance between a notion of beauty and the horrible nature of humanity that Lars often touches base on. I think the balance there is just perfect, and the movie is disturbing and beautiful in equal parts. The Idiots is a comedy set in Denmark. That one got a 7.5. It is a pretty funny and controversial movie. And then we get to Dancer in the Dark, which is a 7.5. Angela saved that from C tier oblivion. And I'm not going to touch that score for her sake. But this is when when I was looking through and I started to adjust some scores.
Okay.
Antichrist, a very nice, beautiful looking movie, but I went down from a 7.25, I went down to a 6.5 on that one.
Okay.
Because I think visually that movie is really worth watching and interesting to see how he does effects. But it seemed like there was just this goofy oversimplification of the motivations of the movie. It seemed a little silly.
Yes.
It seemed a little silly. A little adolescent in some ways, you know, almost like a movie you'd make that a smart 19-year-old would make after a breakup. That's what that and it's as good as he can write it at that age.
Yeah,
but it's still like, all right.
Yeah, it's very women would hate women if they really looked at women.
I mean, look, some women are bitches. We know this.
Some women are bitches, but so are some men.
Let's not I'm not supporting all men. I wouldn't recommend supporting all women.
Don't support all of anybody for any reason just because.
So maybe we should bump Antichrist back up then.
No.
Okay.
I think 6.5 makes sense.
Melancholia, definitely one of his higher rated, 8.25. Another one that I felt like was really balanced, and Charlotte Gainsbourg, her performance in that, I really enjoyed it quite a bit. Nymphomaniac, we watched the 5.5 hour version of it, and I think there's a lot good about it, but when your movie is, when we watched the 5.5 hour version of it, a couple of mediocre hours can really drag down a solid 3, but we fell on a 6.5 there. Dogville, we ranked this S tier, but look, I brought it down to an 8.75.
Okay.
I think that's a great score. But to switch it off, you would wish you gave Jesus Christ Superstar a higher score.
Yes.
So for your sake, I'd put Jesus Christ Superstar in S tier and brought Dogville out of S tier. Dogville is a very good movie with some great concepts. 8.75 is a fantastic score, but I don't know if it's really S tier.
I agree.
Manderley, one of the lower scorers. I actually brought it down because I forgot about some weird cuts in the movie when we were discussing it. And I guess we're watching so many movies we can notice these things, but there are some straight cuts in the scenes that there was something a little clumsy, almost like the obligation to force the original concept we saw in Dogville. And I think the movie is, if you're a Lars fan, I think the movie is worthy. I think there is something just strange about it. It's always worth checking out, but I brought that down to a 5.5, down from a 6.25.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So he's got 2 C films, Epidemic and Manderley. And The House That Jack Built, we fell upon a 6.75. A good character study, if not bogged down by tropes similar to the way Nymphomaniac was. But we think it's a 0.25 better than Nymphomaniac.
Yes.
At least because it's, it's only 2.5 hours long instead of 5.
But it could have been 2, I think.
But yeah, so that's our breakdown of this year, the year of Von Trier.
The dreary year of Von Trier.
An interesting fellow, a creative mind, a guy who early on showed some real skill, and in his own specific way, and he seems to average about a B, like a high B in his movies. So, but he's always been a little divisive, but that'll do it for the dreary year of Lars von Trier. But next year, in the year 2025, we will be analyzing another director who's maybe even more controversial than Lars von Trier.
Definitely more widely known and commented upon.
A much bigger box office as well. But we are talking about the films, don't get it twisted, because we're talking about the films of M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah, we are going to talk, but by the end of 2025, we'll have discussed every M. Night Shyamalan film, even those ones that everyone seems to hate. And I'm going to try to keep an open mind, because I got to admit, I'm not like a big fan of that guy. I think his cinematographers tend to be really good, but I want to wash my preconceived notions and take them in again. So at the end of January, we'll be discussing, I think, his biggest hit, The Sixth Sense, the one that broke him out into the mainstream.
And I will also keep an open mind. I've not seen all of his films. I've seen a few. I feel like I remember liking a couple of them, but I don't know.
Yes, I really want to like some.
Yeah.
I really want to.
We always go in wanting to like everything.
Yes.
We never go in wanting to hate stuff. Even if people say it's terrible, we're like, there could be something good about this.
But we're different now. We've watched a lot more movies now. We've talked about a lot of movies now. So maybe we can get something out of these. We will see. But that said, like, subscribe, check the show notes for links, other places to find us. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think about The House That Jack Built. What are you excited about with next year's director, M. Night Shyamalan? What movie are you excited to hear us talk about next year? And one more time.
Death to all traitors.